Have you ever trusted someone so completely, only to have that trust shattered in an instant? That's where my story begins. An unexpected discovery, a betrayal that cut deeper than I ever thought possible, and a battle that forced me to uncover strength I didn't know I had. But this isn't just a tale of heartbreak, it's about turning the tables, finding resilience, and watching justice unfold in ways no one could have predicted. If you've ever wondered how to rise above when life pulls the rug out from under you, you'll want to hear every twist of this story. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, nothing out of the ordinary. But, as they say, life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My phone buzzed on the counter, her name glowing on the screen. Innocently, I picked it up thinking it was something trivial. That's when I saw it, a message notification from her personal trainer. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked, and my heart dropped. The words were blatant, unapologetic, and painted a picture I never wanted to see. I can't wait for the day when it's just us. That single sentence shattered the world I thought I knew. My hands trembled as I scrolled further. The messages weren't just casual exchanges. They were vivid plans for a future together. Dates, places, even whispered promises to leave the complications behind. I couldn't believe it. How long had this been going on? The details weren't even the most painful part. It was the realization that she'd already envisioned a life where I didn't exist. The walls of our home suddenly felt suffocating. Was this really happening? Or was I trapped in some cruel nightmare? I paced the living room, trying to make sense of the betrayal. My mind raced with questions that had no answers. Should I confront her now or wait until I had more proof? But proof of what? The texts were already undeniable. Part of me wanted to shout, cry, or smash something, but another part held me back. No, I needed to stay calm. After all, this was just the beginning. Something told me there was far more to uncover. When she walked through the door that evening, I was already sitting on the couch, her phone in my hand. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my mind, but nothing prepared me for the lump in my throat when I met her eyes. "We need to talk," I said, my voice colder than I expected. She tilted her head, feigning confusion, but I could see the flicker of recognition. Without waiting for a reply, I began reading the messages aloud, each word hitting the air like a hammer. Her face shifted through a spectrum of emotions: shock, panic, and then something I didn't expect: indifference. "It's not what you think," she stammered at first, but her voice lacked conviction. I stayed silent, letting her unravel under the weight of her own lies. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders dropping in resignation. "Fine," she said flatly, crossing her arms. "Yes, I'm seeing him, and honestly, I don't regret it." Her nonchalance felt like a dagger twisting in my chest, but I swallowed the pain, determined not to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. What struck me most wasn't just the admission, it was her lack of remorse. There were no apologies, no tears, no excuses. She simply stood there, staring at me as if I were the one inconveniencing her. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about a mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was deliberate, calculated, and as much as it hurt, I knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The battle lines had been drawn. I barely had time to process her admission before she delivered the next blow. "Let's not drag this out," she said, her tone sharp and detached. "I want a divorce." For a moment, her words hung in the air, cold and final. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the ease with which she discarded everything we had built together. No hesitation, no reflection, just a clean break, as if I were a chapter she was eager to close. And then came the kicker. She wanted half of everything. The audacity of her demand left me momentarily speechless. Half of everything. The house, the savings, the life we'd created. It was as if she had been planning this for months, waiting for the perfect moment to unveil her masterstroke. My mind raced with questions. Did she think I'd roll over and let her take it all? Or was this just another move in her twisted game? Whatever her intentions, I knew I couldn't let her walk away unscathed, but I played it cool. "You want half?" I asked, my voice steady, though my insides churned with anger. She met my gaze, her expression devoid of any guilt. "I deserve it," she replied, as if it were a matter of fact. It was clear she had underestimated me, assuming I'd fold under the weight of her betrayal. Little did she know, I had an ace up my sleeve, a detail she hadn't accounted for. And as much as it stung to watch her dismiss our past so casually, I felt a small, defiant spark ignite within me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the sting of her arrogance. She truly believed she held all the cards, walking around like the queen of the castle while plotting to take half of everything I'd worked for. But what she didn't know, what she never could have guessed, was that the majority of our assets weren't even in my name. Years ago, my father had convinced me to shield my finances through a trust, ensuring our family wealth would remain protected. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Now it felt like a lifeline. She continued to play her part, making bold claims about her entitlement and how she deserved to be compensated for all her sacrifices. Every word felt like salt on an open wound, but I held my tongue. I didn't need to argue or justify myself, not yet. While she paraded her demands to anyone who'd listen, I quietly began preparing for the battle ahead. My lawyer, a calm and calculated strategist, reassured me that our position was ironclad. The assets she wanted so desperately were legally untouchable. Still, I couldn't help but wonder how she'd react when the truth finally came to light. It became a game of patience, waiting for the right moment to reveal my hand. She underestimated me, blinded by her greed and the belief that she'd already won. Every smug comment she made only fueled my resolve. The more she schemed, the more certain I became that she'd never see it coming. And when the time came to face her in court, I knew she'd be in for the shock of her life. She wasted no time assembling her army. Within days, she had hired a high-profile attorney known for tearing apart opponents in court. The move felt calculated, almost theatrical, a warning shot meant to intimidate me into submission. But if she thought her flashy legal team would scare me, she was sorely mistaken. While she broadcasted her strategy to the world, I quietly enlisted my own lawyer, a discreet but brilliant expert in cases just like mine. He wasn't flashy, but he knew how to win. The tension between us grew unbearable. Every encounter felt like a battle of wills, each of us silently daring the other to blink first. She walked around with an air of triumph, convinced her legal dream team would steamroll me. Meanwhile, I played the part of the unbothered ex-husband, refusing to show my hand. The truth was, I had no intention of giving her what she wanted, not without a fight. My lawyer's calm confidence gave me hope that this war would end on my terms, not hers. Still, it was hard not to feel the weight of it all. The whispers from mutual friends, the veiled comments she made online, everything felt like part of her strategy to paint me as the villain. But I held on to one thought. The truth was on my side. No matter how much noise she made, facts didn't lie. And as the court date drew closer, I could sense her confidence turning into desperation. She might have started this battle with all the bravado in the world, but something told me she wasn't ready for the storm headed her way. The day finally arrived. Courtroom nerves hit like a freight train, but I kept my composure. Across the room she sat, flanked by her attorney, exuding confidence as if the victory was already hers. I'll admit, a part of me wanted to doubt myself. But as the proceedings began, my lawyer's steady demeanor reminded me that I was prepared. We had the truth and a solid strategy on our side. Her lawyer wasted no time, painting her as a devoted partner who had sacrificed so much and deserved her fair share. The performance was almost convincing, but I stayed focused, knowing our turn would come. When it did, my lawyer presented a clear, undeniable case. The assets she coveted weren't mine to share. The trust, set up years before, made it legally impossible for her to claim assent. Her confidence visibly cracked as reality sank in. The silence was deafening when the final financial disclosures were laid bare. Her attorney, once full of swagger, faltered under the weight of the evidence. The fortune she had assumed was hers to divide turned out to be far beyond her reach. I caught her expression, a mix of shock and frustration, and felt a flicker of vindication. For the first time since this ordeal began, I saw her realize that she had overplayed her hand. But this wasn't the end. If anything, it was just the beginning of her unraveling. It didn't take long for her to switch tactics. With the courtroom revelation still fresh, she turned to the one weapon she had left: manipulation. It started subtly at first. Vague posts on social media about betrayal, sacrifice, and injustice. She painted herself as the victim, carefully omitting the truth of her own actions. Mutual friends began reaching out, some cautiously asking for my side of the story, others openly siding with her. It was a masterclass in damage control, and I could see her desperation in every move. But she didn't stop there. Rumors began to circulate, stories twisted beyond recognition. Suddenly, I was the cold, ungrateful husband who never appreciated her sacrifices. It stung more than I expected, especially when people I'd trusted started to believe her lies. I wanted to shout the truth from the rooftops, but my lawyer warned me to stay quiet. "Let her dig her own hole," he said. "The truth has a way of surfacing when you need it most." Still, the silence was unbearable. Watching her try to tarnish my name while I stayed silent felt like a losing game. But deep down, I knew better. Her efforts to smear me weren't a sign of strength. They were the actions of someone who realized they'd already lost. And while it hurt to see my character under attack, I knew the courtroom would be the final battleground. All I had to do was endure until then. The courtroom felt heavier that day, as if everyone could sense something big was about to happen. She sat across from me, her confidence visibly shaken, though she tried to mask it with a defiant glare. Her attorney launched into yet another argument, filled with exaggerations and accusations designed to sway the judge. I stayed composed, knowing my lawyer had everything under control. This was the moment we'd been building toward, the moment when the truth would finally come to light. Piece by piece, my lawyer dismantled her claims. Every accusation was countered with evidence. Every exaggerated demand exposed for the baseless ploy it was. When it came time to address the betrayal, the courtroom fell silent. My lawyer presented the messages, the very ones that had shattered my world, and laid out the timeline with precision. There was no room for doubt or denial. The truth, clear and undeniable, was laid bare for everyone to see. As the judge began to speak, I glanced at her. The smug confidence she once wore like armor was gone, replaced by a look of quiet defeat. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was relief. Relief that the lies, the manipulation, the endless battle was finally nearing its end. The judge's decision wasn't the conclusion she had hoped for, but I knew this was only the beginning of her reckoning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight on my chest start to lift. The judge's verdict was clear, direct, and far from what she had anticipated. Her demands were denied, her claims dismantled piece by piece. The assets she had so boldly assumed were hers to take remained untouched, shielded by the trust my father had wisely established years ago. All she received was a temporary spousal support payment, far less than she'd counted on. Her face was a mix of shock and fury, as if the reality of her defeat had finally settled in. As the courtroom emptied, she lingered, her once confident stride replaced by hesitant, almost embarrassed steps. Her lawyer muttered something to her, but she barely acknowledged it. For someone who had walked in with the air of a conqueror, the weight of her loss was unmistakable. I should have felt vindicated, even triumphant, but instead, I felt something else. Closure. Her defeat wasn't just about the money or the assets. It was about the truth winning out, about finally breaking free from the grip of her betrayal. Outside the courthouse, I stood for a moment, breathing in the crisp air and feeling a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in months. The battle was over, and while the scars of this war would take time to heal, I knew I had emerged stronger. She had underestimated me. underestimated the strength that comes from knowing you're in the right. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but think, this chapter might be closed, but my story was far from over. Walking away from the courthouse felt like shedding a heavy burden I'd been carrying for far too long. The months of betrayal, anger, and uncertainty had taken their toll, but in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. It wasn't just about winning the case, it was about reclaiming my life. For the first time in months, I could look toward the future without the shadow of her deceit hanging over me. Back home, the support from my friends and family became my anchor. Their unwavering belief in me reminded me that despite everything, I wasn't alone. I started to focus on myself, rediscovering hobbies, reconnecting with people, and rebuilding the confidence she had tried to strip away. It wasn't an easy process, but each small step felt like a victory. The life I thought I'd lost wasn't gone. It was simply waiting for me to take it back. As the days turned into weeks, the memories of her betrayal began to lose their sting. They became lessons instead, reminders of my resilience and strength. While I couldn't change the past, I could shape my future. And that future, I realized, was mine to create. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. One where I called the shots, free from lies and manipulation. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was excited to see what came next.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.